Welcome back, everybody, to High Heel Diaries YouTube talk show. I'm your host, Natalie Wilson. And I want to know, are you watching these videos? Are you really watching them? Or are you skimming through them? Because you really need to stop and pay attention to some of the topics that we are discussing with these women. It takes a lot of guts to come out here and talk about your personal stories. But at the end of it, what I want you to get is that they are triumphant. They've overcome. And that is the message we're trying to put across today. And I have a wonderful guest with me today who is here to talk about her personal story. We're here to talk about a disorder that often goes missed. It's a disorder that often goes misdiagnosed by even medical professionals. It's a disorder that, at times it has the stigma attached to it, and that is something that needs to change. We're here to talk to Jennifer Kennedy about her personal story. Jennifer, welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. So, COVID's still happening. How's it going?
COVID is still happening.
How's life with that right now?
Life is okay because I'm a little bit in the middle of nowhere. So where I live on a lake far away from people. So that part works.
Yep.
However, I miss seeing people. I miss my friends. I miss just going out and having a night out.
Yeah, and generally, like right now, it's hard for everybody, but like when you live far away from people, I'm sure it's even more challenging, right?
It's definitely more isolating. But I'm really trying to make it not my new normal and just ride this wave. It will be over.
Yeah,
and
it will.
Yeah.
It has to. You know what? I know that change will come, and throughout all the things, the negative things that we're seeing happening right now, we have to believe that something positive is going to come out of it. So, as we move forward. So I always like to start our interviews with some icebreaker questions, just to loosen everyone up.
Loosen up here.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a couple things here. So, if you could wake up anywhere tomorrow, where would it be?
Ooh, Bora Bora.
Bora Bora?
Okay, wake up anywhere. All right, truth be told, I would want to be in the Muskokas.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
I love
and for those who
Muskokas.
are watching this that are not from this area, what is the Muskokas?
It's a beautiful piece of forest and lake. I'm just kidding. It's a little bit, I don't know if it's classified as Northern Ontario, but there's some lakes out there, and it's surrounded by forest and just beautiful. It's a beautiful environment.
What I'm getting is that it's just beautiful and peaceful.
Thank you. Yes,
Yeah.
peaceful.
Yeah.
It is so peaceful. It is my happy place where I feel very connected, and it's a very much more slow pace of living up there. So a lot of people are retired. So
Okay, good.
with my son in tow, I would.
Of
be
course.
with my son in tow.
Of course. If you were to be famous, what would you be famous for?
For being so funny.
Yes.
Just kidding.
Okay.
Maybe.
That's a good thing. Make people laugh. That's always a good thing.
Yeah.
Life is too heavy. We need more humor in this world.
Yes, I agree.
But is that what you want to be famous for?
No.
Oh, okay.
I would want to be famous for a good cause. A good cause.
Any that you can think of that would be...
I think even what we're talking about today, just advocating on behalf of autism. I never thought I would even be where I am right now. And as a believer, this is, I know, obviously the plan that's meant for me.
Yeah.
And so I know that that's something I need to do.
Yeah, your purpose in life. Yeah, absolutely. And this might be a start, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that might be a start. Okay, great. It's great to be famous for good causes, that's for sure. What is something unexpected that has changed about you in the last few years? So someone that's known you, that hasn't seen you or spoken to you in about 3 years, what would they be like, wow, really, Jen? I didn't know that.
Okay, so I think the best way to describe this would be, if you had met me a few years ago, I was a very cold, bitter person. I was really closed off, just super guarded in a lot of ways. And I just lacked a lot of light and love in my life. And in the past few years, due to many things, I have grown. I've had that opportunity to grow, and I've been blessed with mentors such as yourself, other people that have helped me. And now I like to think that majority of the time I radiate light and love, and that when I'm talking to someone, I'm talking to them from a place of love.
Oh, that's beautiful.
So
right. So that would be a huge change if someone hasn't seen you in a few years.
Definitely.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And that must feel good within too.
It does.
It does feel good. I know the feeling. Well, good. I'm happy. I'm happy that we've gotten those let loose kind of questions out of the way. Okay, good. So, you're a single mom of a 10-year-old son.
That's right.
Tell me a little bit about that. I know little boys can be, I have a 13-year-old son, so I know that, and out of all my other children, he's the only boy.
Yeah.
I know they can be different than girls, a little bit rambunctious. Tell me about your son, Aiden.
Well, he is a little Energizer bunny from the moment he wakes up until he goes to sleep. He is really funny. He makes me laugh even on my worst of days.
Oh.
And even on my best of days, but he's hilarious.
Don't you just love that? It's like he's like your little best friend.
He is. He's my little buddy.
Yeah.
And especially when he's trying to like really make me laugh, he talks in a British accent, and it's so good.
We're gonna go back a little bit. Talking about being a single mom, you learned some news about your son some years ago. I want you to tell me about that, and tell me about how that changed the landscape of how you would parent for the rest of your life.
So, I used to blame myself for if my son was having a meltdown or there was an issue or whatever he was struggling with. And I think a lot of parents usually turn into themselves and blame when they can't figure
question.
it out.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Yeah. And so I did a lot of that, struggling to try to help him and figure out what is going on, and like I just felt so at a loss. And so
because he was reacting to certain things, and you were wondering what was going on, and
so him going to school, and I would get a call from the school, and they would say, he's having a meltdown, and he's like freaking out, and he can't handle it, and whatever. And I'm going, well, like, what's going on? Like, what happened before? What happened after? They're like, we have no idea. And that would always be the same thing. We have no idea.
And around what age were these things starting to happen?
Like 6, 7, 8 years old. And so that's when I really started digging and trying to figure out, okay, so like, why is he like having these meltdowns at the same time every day in class? And then turns out it's because that particular time in class was when all the kids got rowdy, and all the noise that they made was too much for him. It was overstimulation. He couldn't handle it. It was like the equivalent of, for most of us, somebody running their hand down a chalkboard, and that noise that's made. Right. And that feeling you get of like, ugh. That's how he feels when he's around too much.
Okay, so you did your own research, and then you from your research, did you think that it could be autism? And this is, of course, what we're talking about today, or Autism Spectrum Disorder is another name for it. Or was it that you decided to take him to the doctor, and then they said it could be?
So I ended up taking him to a specialist, and she said, after doing everything, her whole assessment, she said that he didn't have autism, because the two components with autism are struggles with social interaction and communication. And because Aiden had excelled and was advanced in his communication, they didn't think that he had it, whereas he had major socialization issues, for lack of better words.
Right. So I'm going to interrupt for a moment, because just because you said that, I want to read like the definition of autism, or Autism Spectrum Disorder, because you hit the nail on the head exactly with what I want people to understand about autism. It being there's exceptionalities in both ways, right?
Yeah.
So this is from alpinelearninggroup.org. Autism Spectrum Disorder, ASD, is a neurodevelopmental disability that affects an individual's ability to communicate and the ability to engage in social interaction. Additionally, the individual may have a restricted range of interests or repetitive behavior. Skill deficits and challenges associated with ASD will vary greatly from child to child, and no two children with autism are the same. Each will have his own individual strengths and challenges associated with autism. So do you agree to that?
I definitely agree, and I really like how you put that, where there can be exceptionalities on either side. So you could have a great exceptionality or,
Yeah, and that's from what I've learned. Definitely. So, so talk more. So so it was misdiagnosed.
It was misdiagnosed. So I thought, okay, back to the drawing board. I don't know. Okay, so he has ADHD. Sorry, they had diagnosed him with ADHD. But there was a misdiagnosis of autism.
Yeah, which often is what is said, that that's what's happening instead of it being the diagnosis of autism, because they kind of go hand in hand. A lot of children or young people with autism have ADHD, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it wasn't until I pulled him from school to homeschool him, because we had such a hard time with that after that, when he went back into school, it was one of the teachers actually that pushed me to get him to see another specialist. And when I did that, and I went in to meet with this gentleman, and he was like this renowned doctor, everybody just absolutely loved him, and he is a fantastic doctor. When he went to see him, like within minutes, he was like, he has autism.
He knew.
Yeah, from that, just the way that Aiden talked. Aiden gets stuck on things, very repetitive with certain things, just different symptoms that way. He just knew. He knew.
Wow. Okay, so that was then the official diagnosis then.
So he gave the official diagnosis.
And he was 8 at that time?
He was 8, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. So you said about 3-4 years ago, so he's 10 now, so about 3-4 years ago was when he started to show symptoms. And you did name some of them. But for a parent out there that is, in that kind of cusp where they're thinking that it could be or it couldn't be, and of course, seek medical attention. And I always tell any of my viewers during any of my shows that any of the information that we give, myself and the guest, is information that we either learned from our own research or learned from personal experience. But please always seek the help, guidance of a medical professional. So, what are some of the other symptoms that Aiden showed that made you know something's up here? Yeah,
so he would make noises, which a lot of children who have autism, they do that. It's like a self-soothing thing. And not noises like maybe necessarily you would think, but just like words, but like a noise in a word kind of thing. And he would do that repetitively.
Like, could you give an example?
He'd be like, ow, 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 ow. Like, and I'd be like, oh, what's wrong? He's like, oh, nothing. I'd be like, ow, 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 ow. And then I started to realize, oh, like, this is a self-soothing thing. Also, hyper-focusing on stuff. And being very rigid with that, not being able to shift. A major symptom actually was not being able to transition from transitional issues, from one thing to the next. So any type of change. So I would have to give him...
And that's hard for anybody generally.
Yeah.
But not to have a young person that's dealing with this disorder.
Yeah. Another symptom is sensory issues, such as a lot of times children will have issues with their clothes. Because that's what is on your body mostly, right? It's clothes. So for my son, he can't wear jeans. He's always been that way. He can't handle the texture of the jeans. He has to wear jogging pants.
Interesting.
And certain t-shirts, he also has to wear a sweater with a hood, so that he can wear his hood over his head, because it's a comfort thing for him.
I was just going to say, a comfort thing.
Yeah. And like things have to be very particular, the particular type of shoes. So definitely sensory.
Oh, okay. So good information. I wanted to add, remember I was speaking about how some other conditions can kind of go hand in hand with someone that has autism, but sometimes this is where the misdiagnosis, I would say, comes from, because they might say it's this instead of autism. So again, from Alpine Learning Group, Autism Spectrum Disorder encompasses conditions which previously had their own names, such as Asperger's syndrome. And Dr. Asperger was one of the doctors that kind of coined autism, the name autism, but stemming from his own research with his with the disorder called Asperger's.
Yeah.
So autistic disorder, so AD, autism, classic autism, there's all those different names that can go with it. Childhood disintegrative disorder, or CDD. Heller's syndrome, disintegrative psychosis. Have you heard of these terms?
The last one, no.
Disintegrative psychosis. And pervasive developmental disorder, not otherwise specified. So some serious names here, but a lot of those are what a doctor might say. Okay, well, you might not really have autism, but you might have one of these, but similar to autism. So it can be kind of confusing, right? I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely can be confusing. I think one of the major red flags or indicators that you should look out for is extreme anxiety and fear in a given situation, and triggers. Because every child will have a different trigger, but, you know, and understanding also, looking at your child, and if they're upset, looking at it from the standpoint of, is this a meltdown or is this a temper tantrum? Because in the autism world, a meltdown is being overstimulated, autism related. A temper tantrum is not getting what you want.
Right.
And a child with autism can have both a temper tantrum or a meltdown. But if you're looking at your child and they're upset and you haven't taken anything away from them, they have no reason to really be upset that you can think of, and you're starting to realize that it's the same trigger every time,
right,
then it's probably something close to a sensory processing disorder or autism.
Right. So is there any time before he was actually diagnosed that he was reacting in those ways, and you, as a mom, not knowing that he has this disorder, do you recall any reaction that you had that, you know, you look back at it saying, man, that wasn't the greatest reaction I could have had I known? Because a lot of parents are probably going through the same thing, like disciplining their children accordingly because of, you know, a temper tantrum or whatnot. And really, at the end of the day, it might be that they have this disorder.
100%. An example that I have, it would be, okay, so we used to go to Sunday school. So we went to church every week. And when I would bring him downstairs to go to Sunday school, he would like freeze. He would get close to the door and he would just like freeze. And I always thought it was like, discipline your children, you got to do what I say, you know, get in the room, whatever. Meanwhile, he's freaking out inside because he has all of this anxiety from thinking about socializing with all these kids. And that was such a trigger for him that it was like next to impossible to basically like force him to go into that room. Yeah. And it took like 100 times before he would finally go in on his own. Right. And even when he went in, sometimes he wouldn't last.
Right. And so can you imagine just like forcing a child, like, you're good, come on, let's go, just get in the room. Meanwhile, I'm sure that can like play on their
makes
mental.
It way worse.
For sure.
Way worse. That's my experience. Wow. When you have a child who's in that state and you're trying to force what you feel is discipline on them, it never works.
Never works.
No.
Wow. So I'm going to read, this is some signs and symptoms, and because we're on this part of the discussion, individuals with ASD may present with some of the following exceptional characteristics. And you can just kind of nod your head if you know that, say Aiden's showing some of them. Nonverbal reasoning. the ability to understand and analyze visual information and solve problems using visual reasoning.
Yeah.
Exceptional memory.
Yeah.
Aiden does, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Perceptual motor skills, so hand-eye coordination, body-eye coordination, auditory language skills. And these are their exceptional ones. So these are the ones that are like, they are really good at.
Like the pianist or whatever, yeah.
Which, you know, and I'll get back to this, but a lot of us have, and this is where the stigma, I think, conversation comes from with regards to autism, and why a lot of parents might feel maybe shame or feel that they don't want to use that term with their child, because when we think of these exceptionalities, we go back to Rain Man, we go back to that movie that I think most of us have seen way back in the day, with how Dustin Hoffman portrayed so eloquently what an autistic adult anyways was like. And a lot of these things I'm reading now are things that he displayed. He, of course, he had this really great, like you said, the piano playing. Computer proficiency. How's Aiden with the computer?
Aiden is a genius
really?
when it comes to computers.
And he's 10.
Like, he codes. He does...
That's amazing to me. I feel so like inadequate.
Yeah.
Wow. Exceptional skills in creative and imaginative expression, music, art, writing, drama.
So, okay, we all know that show Deal or No Deal, right? Mm-hmm. So last night, we were watching that, and then Aiden goes, oh, you know what I'm going to do? And he does this with so many things. He goes, I'm going to make Deal or No Deal in Minecraft. So he did. Within like 10 minutes, he had all these boxes in Minecraft and the numbers.
So Minecraft, for anybody that doesn't know, like if you have a child, you probably should know, especially a boy. It's a PS game, PS4 game, where they build things, build houses, and it's crazy, but it's amazing. Yeah. So yeah, he did that.
So yeah, it's just like within 10 minutes, and it completely worked, and I was like, wow.
Yeah,
like,
floors you. And then we have visual-spatial ability, so capacity to identify visual and spatial relationships among objects. All individuals with the diagnosis demonstrate some of the following. Impairment, and then these are some of the issues I'd say that can be problematic, which are what parents kind of look at as, okay, there's something going on here, we need to get this figured out. Impairment in social relationships. Insufficient communication and use of language, perseverating on interests and activities. So I think you mentioned something with regards to that, like when he's interested in something, or if he fixates.
He hyper-focuses. Yeah.
Right.
Fixates on stuff.
Dependence on routine. So routine is important.
He has to have routine. He's not the type of child where I say, you know, hey, we're going to go stay at, Aunt Colleen's house. And it's like, okay, at a whim, and just grab our stuff and go. No, that's not happening.
No. Okay. Wow. Behavioral problems, unconventional reaction to sensory stimulation, the denim. Yeah. So now, like, reading all these and hearing you talk, like, it just all clicks. Variability of intellectual functioning, uneven developmental profile, difficulties with sleeping, toileting, and eating, immune irregularities, and gastrointestinal problems.
Yeah, so, diet is huge.
Yeah.
And Aiden's always been lactose intolerant, and he's always had sleep issues.
Wow.
And a lot of children, that's actually a main one, a lot of children with autism have sleep issues.
Oh.
It's a huge indicator.
Wow. So, okay, so we just talked about those with autism are known to have exceptionalities in both ways. So can you shed some light for us with Aiden on some of his gifts? Like, what are his main gifts that you have seen, and some of the biggest difficulties he has?
Yeah. So Aiden has always had an exceptionality with numbers. even from a very young age, and letters. I have a video of him 8 months old crawling across the floor saying his ABCs.
At 8 months?
At 8 months, before he could even walk. And I was like,
what?
Whoa.
That's crazy.
Yeah, like major exceptionality, can do complex.
So did you think that, I just have a really smart kid? Like,
everyone would tell me that. They'd be like, he's just so smart. And I'm like, yeah, I know, but like, this is weird still. Like, what's going on here? Like, because like, I was also 19 when I had him. So a lot of it was still a learning curve. So I was like, I feel like this is a lot earlier than you're supposed to do this. Anyways, right. Okay. So math, numbers, he is very, very gifted in that area. And creativity, making games, making books, like anything that requires a creative mind. Wow. Very much so. And he has a huge heart. That has nothing to do with autism. But he has a huge heart. Of course. And he loves, he just loves people. And so he's very sensitive, which I think is a good thing.
That's a good thing, yeah.
But as for difficulties, Aiden struggles with self-esteem issues from, which again, that part's not autism related, but sort of in a way because he just wants to feel normal, and he doesn't want to be different, and he's always felt different because of the things we've discussed so far, right? Of course.
Because he knows, right? Like, he knows he's...
Yeah, he knows.
He has a diagnosis of autism.
I've told him. Yeah. And on that note, I just want to say, I did tell him when he was diagnosed, because for me it was... he needs to be self-aware so that he can learn the coping skills throughout his life. Yeah. So he can be more successful.
And good on you for doing that, right? Because I think it's really important to, if there's a disorder for one of your children, and even go as far as talking about separation and divorce with parents. Like, a lot of parents try to keep those things, and I'm going to talk about them hand in hand. Whether it's the separation and divorce, and then an issue with the child, an ailment or disorder, they try to shelter their child from knowing these things. But meanwhile, they're so smart, they're so intelligent, and they are there listening, and they're there hearing. You think that Aiden wouldn't have ever heard a conversation with you and somebody else saying, I think he's got autism. And he's going to think to himself, well, I have autism? Like, what is autism? You know what I mean? Like, so I think it's so important to discuss these things with them so that they're ready, and they're armed with the knowledge already if someone was to ever come to them and say, boom, or say something to them that affects them in a negative way, but, and them having no clue and no idea of their own disorder.
But yeah, we had that conversation during an hour-long car ride, so we figured it out. But also, just really quickly on that note, self-acceptance for him too, so that he can create like a circle for himself of the right kinds of people in his life that will accept him and love him for who he is. Absolutely. Just making sure that you have the right people in your circle that don't judge you, that love you. And just all of that. Yeah. It's so important. But as for, to go back to like his difficulties though, he really struggles with change. And he really struggles with noises. Loud noises is a major one for him. Yeah. If you were to be having an argument around him, which it happens, it's life, he could not handle it.
Like with any other disorder or illness, and I'll talk about my own experience with breast cancer. You have to realize that it's not only the person that is affected is the one that deals with it, but it's people that are their caregivers that is also affected, right? Yeah. So yes, this is about Aiden, but this is also about you. And I want to know, but as a single mom, you have family and friends, and yes, his father's involved in his life, but predominantly you're the go-to. So when you learned about this and you're dealing with this and you have to be with Aiden on a regular basis, how did that make you feel? How did it make you feel in the beginning when you learned about this? And how has it been along the way dealing with this? And tell me about some of your support systems.
So before he was diagnosed, I was very much in denial, and I had a very hard time accepting it, and I will admit that, and I won't get into my reasons, but it was difficult. But once he was diagnosed and I accepted that, it was like this huge relief where it's like I finally understand, and I finally know, okay, so I can help my son in this way. That there's, now there's all this information out there that I can tap into, that I feel like I'm not helpless anymore. I went from helpless to hopeful,
right,
in the situation. And my family was a huge support system. They still are. And they, just the fact that they love him unconditionally regardless of his diagnosis, and they love me, and they support us, that made a huge difference too.
Of course. So before you started understanding it and knowing, then you started to feel hopeful. Was there ever a time, and I'm just trying to delve into it because I'm sure a lot of parents that are kind of new to this are maybe feeling this way. So I want to shed some light on it. Did you ever feel did you ever blame yourself? Did you start thinking, did I do something? Because it's not something that anybody does during pregnancy. It's not something that you could have done during pregnancy. Anything you could have ingested, and an environmental issue. It's a neurological disorder. So, but did you go through any of that?
I went through a grieving process, and I still do grieve sometimes. So I don't know if that grieving process will ever truly end. But grieving, in the sense of I'm grieving for my son, because it's why does he have to come into this world with these struggles? And why can't he be able to not have struggles like those other kids,
right? And
it be easier just like those other kids have it, because he's just a child. He doesn't deserve to struggle like this. And so I've grieved for him that way.
Faith plays a huge number on you when it comes to getting over something and getting past something, and knowing that at the end of the day everything's going to be okay. So is faith a part of your healing process, and has that helped you?
Faith has been a huge part of my healing process, and of Aiden's. I am a believer. Aiden is a believer. And I would not be here explaining this without my faith. That's my purpose. That's his purpose.
Yeah.
That is our support. And it's everything.
Yeah. So I mean, for all intents and purposes, when you look at Aiden, when someone looks at Aiden, he looks normal, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that might be that could be a help or hindrance, I think, for him.
Yeah.
When you think about it, because sometimes when a child looks ill, or it looks like he has a disorder, then people are a little bit more compassionate, or they understand. But then when Aiden looking normal, when he responds a certain way, they might think, well, what's wrong with this child? It's almost like you have to walk around with, I have a disorder called autism on my head. So you understand why I react that way.
This is the hardest part right here. This is the part that frustrates me so much.
And I wanted to get to that, because autism and how an autistic person looks varies from person to person, child to child. Right? And how they react.
It does.
So, yeah.
And it's if I feel like there's this idea that if a child's not in a wheelchair, then they're fine. Well, you know what? No, that's not the case. And, people, please stop judging.
Yeah. And that's the really horrible stigma there is out there about it, is that people have this idea of autism. So if you don't look and act this way, then you don't have autism. Then you're normal, and you're reacting, and you're having a temper tantrum because you're a bad kid.
Yeah, and in return, I must be a bad mom because I didn't discipline them enough. And I've heard that. Trust me, I've gone through it all. And it's like, hold on a second.
Right.
Where's your compassion? Where's your understanding?
Yeah.
And it's usually, not to put a negative note on this, but it's usually the people that you would expect, like educators, to be the most compassionate that aren't. But please don't judge someone without knowing their story. If you see that child in the grocery store throwing themselves on the floor, before you sit and think to yourself that their parent isn't disciplining them, and you go to that judgment, don't do that.
Yep.
You have no idea.
Huge. And not only, like, yes, we're talking about autism and children, but just generally in life. Just generally in life. Don't judge a book till you open it up and start reading about it. Go to the back of the book maybe and look at the little blurb so you understand a little bit about what's going on, right? Like, don't only look on the surface. And I know it sounds so cliche, and you probably heard it a million times, don't judge a book by its cover, but we're all guilty of it, and we all need to do better.
Well,
right?
And if you see someone struggling, if you see, if my son is, in tears and I'm in tears and we're having one of those days, because it happens a lot, and we're both struggling, and rather than just looking at us, how about you just come over and give us a helping hand?
Yeah, can I help you? Yeah. And on that note about on the different symptoms, or sort of how the different reactions a child cannot have, for Aiden, because he's 10 years old in grade, what is he, grade 4?
5. I didn't think about that. Grade 5.
So he can articulate himself and how he feels. What does having autism look like for Aiden? Like, for him, if he was to explain it or talk about it, like, what would that look like?
So I'm really blessed to have a child that can articulate himself really well and has a very good self-awareness of it.
That's great.
So he would sit just like I am and talk to you like a little adult, and he would say, sometimes I just need help with calming down. Sometimes I just need help with just having quiet when I need to have quiet.
He'll actually say that?
Yeah.
Oh, so good.
And sometimes if I make a mistake, please don't hate me for it.
Oh.
Please just let me apologize and move on from this.
My heart.
He says those things. Yeah.
And I can learn something from him. We can all learn something from him. If we can all just say those things to people when we're struggling, and then if people could actually say, okay, I'll allow you that. Right?
Yeah.
And that's good for him.
That's his biggest thing is he's like, I'm trying really hard. I'm trying so hard. Please just, everybody just, if I make a mistake, please just don't hate me for it. And it's like, he just wants everyone to know that please forgive him. Oh, please have a forgiving heart, because he's trying his best.
Yeah.
So,
and you have to pat yourself on the back for, teaching him that, and teaching him how to be like that, and be able to articulate himself the way he does. And that being said, I know you mentioned before that he's got to be careful. Well, you have to be careful for him of the children that he hangs out with, the people he hangs out with, and that they understand. And what about you as a friend with certain family members, or even friends of your own with their children? I'm sure you have to be very particular as to who you associate with and who you bring around your child.
Definitely. So, I mean, if Aiden's not having a good day, and I'm having somebody coming over to the house, I can't go through that anymore where, I have to stress and have anxiety that, and part of this is my own insecurities, but stress and have anxiety that, oh, well, this person won't understand. They won't understand why why he's acting like this today, and they're just going to think he's badly behaved. Right. And they're just whatever. I don't want to go through that anymore.
Right.
I don't want him to go through that anymore. I just want people that love and accept us for who we are.
Yeah.
And we don't need any more judgment. Our life is already difficult dealing with this.
Of course.
We don't need that stuff. We just need, so we need friends and family that care. And so slowly and gradually over time, since his diagnosis, I have swapped people out in my circle.
And you know what? I say this with a lot of things. I say this a lot when you're going through hardships, is that's the time when you really realize who's there for you, who you need to get rid of. You realize who your friends are. You realize who your real friends are. You realize who those family members that, want to be around you or are there for certain reasons, but don't want to be there when push comes to shove. You're like, well, your family, you're supposed to be there through thick and thin, good and bad. And you really learn to weed out those who you don't need in your life anymore. And God has a good way of saying, you know what, this person's not good for you. And he or she is showing his or her face now. So now you make that change. Yeah. Right? So, because you only can have the people there that are going to support you and then be there for you during times like that. You already have a struggle. Why do you need the struggle of dealing with people that really shouldn't be in your life, right?
Yeah, and we want connection. I want people who are around my son to be connected to him. And if you're not connected to him, doesn't mean you're a bad person. It's we all get connected to different people for different reasons.
Right, exactly.
But I just want the right people.
So we were talking about schools and support networks. Like, did you find that there was a lot of support networks out there with regards to outside resources that you can go to for information? Did you find there was enough out there? Did you find now there's more, or even like 4 years ago there wasn't enough?
So there's a lot of information out there. I'm going to praise one particular organization because I think they did an amazing job, CNARC. I'm trying to remember the full name of that. I think it's CNARC Services. Anyways, they're amazing.
How do you spell CNARC for those who might want to know?
KINARK. Yeah, they're amazing. That's all. I mean, just as a general statement, blanket statement. Check them out.
So informational resource.
That's an informational resource. But in terms of support groups, all I've kind of found so far is support groups on Facebook. I would love to find other moms that have children with autism. That's a part that hasn't been filled in our lives yet.
So I'll tell you that from my own research, I found a ton of groups like that on Facebook. So just get on there and you'll see there's a ton of them. And parents that are just there talking about their everyday life experiences with their children. Support for each other and support for their children. I noticed that, and I'll name a few after. But I do think that there's a lot of them out there now. Yeah. I mean, I shouldn't say now because I don't know what was out there before, but from what I found, just doing my research for today's discussion, I saw a lot.
And I think that people in the autism community, it's a really strong community. So everyone in that community, I think, really has a lot of compassion for each other.
Good. Yeah. So let's talk about school. Okay. Tell me about the school system and how they have helped or their lack of help. And, God bless the teachers, because I know a lot of them love their job and they are there because they want to help make a change in these children's lives, and they have to deal with the resources that they have, and if they haven't been armed with the resources to deal with children with autism, then they just don't know how. So talk to me about that, what you found during your experience. And what you think we need.
Let me tell you. Okay, so it was, I'm not even going to sugarcoat this in the least. It was hell and back. It was hell and back dealing with the school system initially, trying to get Aiden support. This is prior to his diagnosis though, so it's not necessarily exactly how it would have gone had he have been diagnosed earlier. But it was a real struggle, mainly to have compassion for him and understanding, just that he's struggling, and that it's not he's a bad kid, and it's not that he's not your problem. It's the system, the way that it's set up. Thankfully, and thank God, when I put Aiden into a school in Oshawa, they were absolutely amazing. And one of the teachers there actually pushed me to get him diagnosed. And we actually bypassed a year waiting list to get diagnosed.
Just that long, is it?
Yeah.
So do you think that, and I don't want to delve away from the subject, but do you think that, why do you think that is?
So
why does it take so long?
Yeah, so only certain doctors can diagnose it. Okay. That's why. And there's only a limited number of doctors that specialize in that. So either more doctors need to become specialized, or, I don't know.
Right.
Okay.
So this teacher pushed you and
she pushed us into that direction, and then she got him into a special program, and it literally changed his life.
Now, was that special program specifically for autism, or was it just a program that was in the program in the school?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's called Special Support Program. Unfortunately, only 10 students get accepted per year, and you have to reapply basically every year, kind of thing, or make sure that you still have a spot. But it's for any children that have exceptional difficulties. So it doesn't necessarily have to be autism. But there are a lot of children who have that in there. So that support, and then when we got the diagnosis, and there was that level of understanding and compassion.
It's almost like, okay, now we know what it is. Now we can figure out how to help him. Even if there's not programs that are implemented specifically in the school for autism.
Exactly, and that's the thing, is it's like it really comes down to that too, like who he is around, and his teacher that he's had for the last couple of years. She is amazing, and she goes out of her way to relate to him and to figure out what works for him and what doesn't.
Yeah, there's and that's what I'm saying about the teachers out there. And like you said, there's good teachers. There's teachers that really love what they do. There's teachers that do it just because it's their job and that's what they went to school for, so they're going to continue to do it. But I've been blessed with some really great teachers for my children, and that they actually really just love their students. Is there anything that you would think, that you would suggest, like if someone from the school district is listening to this right now, is there something that you, as a mom that has a child with autism, that you've noticed that would be important to add to the program to help children with this disorder?
Yeah, I think that every district school board needs to have this SSP classroom. Only Durham and one other, I think, has it. Don't quote me, but I know there's a few that don't. And that classroom is a huge support system for children who have autism, but unfortunately there's only 10 spots for an entire school full of hundreds and hundreds of kids.
Yeah, that's huge.
So let's figure it out and make those, let's increase that. Why can't we have a full classroom size? Let's move some money into that.
Yes.
Because it's unfortunate, because if your child is not having extreme difficulties with it, but they're also not over here either, and they're in the middle, those are the kids that get left. And they don't get the help because they're not severe enough to get it. And that matters. And
there's only 10 spots in certain schools, in certain districts.
Exactly. Some schools don't even have it. So if we can make transgendered bathrooms, all gender bathrooms, edit myself, which is fine. Can we not fix this?
What about the parents that have been crying and screaming for help and for change, right? I mean, this is huge, and it needs to be looked at in greater detail in order to make the change.
Well, and if I may, just for a moment, just very quickly explain that from the time that you realize that you need to take your child to go and see a specialized doctor. It takes about a year to be on a waiting list, minimum, to get a diagnosis. Then from a diagnosis, then it takes months and months and months in the school system to either get into an SSP classroom or get the IEP set up and all these like support set up. Then from there, you're on a 3 to 4 year waiting list with the government to get financial aid support to help you fund the therapies your child needs.
Yes.
And then from there, the organizations that do the therapies have another wait list.
Wow.
So
That's way too
all
long.
in all,
yeah, no, there needs to be change. There need to be either more resources that offer their services so that they don't have to have such a long wait.
Yeah.
But to wait 3 to 4 years through the government to get the funding, that's craziness.
yeah, and it's thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
For ABA
And
services.
I wonder, like, it makes me wonder, is it that there's such a great number of children that are being diagnosed with autism? Or is it that, like, it's, I'm trying to wrap my head around why it would take so long.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I really.
And that's got to be excruciating for parents because they see their children dealing with the issue on an everyday basis. And you have to go through years of waiting to get them help.
Oh yeah, and
Right.
it's crazy to me because if you have another, I'm not gonna say which, but if you have another issue in this world with something else, there's certain things where you get a resource like that tomorrow. But with this, that's how long we have to wait. And these are kids.
I know that sometimes it takes a lot of difficulties and hard times, hardships, ailments, illness, disease, divorce, death, for people to sometimes see the light, if you will, and make changes in their life. You, like most of us, have gone through some very challenging times in your life. And if you will, if you'd like to share some of that with us, share minimum, maximum, whatever you'd like to share. And most importantly, I want to know if this diagnosis and this change in your life with you and your son has changed you for the better.
Yeah. It has definitely changed me for the better and my son for the better. But there has been some real trying times. There have been times where, you know, he hasn't been sleeping and I'm going off of no sleep because of that too. And I just worked, 8 hours and drove 2 hours and by myself, single mom, making dinner, yada yada. And I'm just like, I don't know how much more gas I have in my tank. And now my son wants me to do X, Y, and Z with him. How do I tap into these empty resources now? And I don't have anyone else I can call to just come over and help me out. Right. Because this is, sometimes our everyday life is like that. Yeah. And so it made me build my character inch by inch, minute by minute, day by day. It made me persevere. I had to learn to persevere, to take that extra step even when I really didn't want to. Right. It's like not hitting the snooze button in life, getting up, doing what you gotta do.
But you also, had him young, and you went through some struggles then, which is the beginning of teaching you how to persevere, and the beginning of teaching you how to overcome adversity, difficult relationships and whatnot, right? Those are the beginning, those are the teachings I say God starts with. He starts teaching you and strengthening you and making you, not making you go through hardships, but, this is part of your journey. It was part of your journey, and you had to go through those things in order to build your character and build. And sometimes we do this. Yeah. We become stronger and then we fall again, and we're strong and then we fall again.
Highs and lows.
Yeah. And and then this comes about. So yeah, you had to tap into your
dig deep. Yeah. But the biggest thing I think is,
I saw a light bulb just go off. Ding.
Yeah, I'm like ding. I'm sorry I interrupted you. I think I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
But love, that is what I've learned the most, is love. Is that every person wants to be loved.
Mm-hmm.
Love is what makes this world go round. It's the reason that we're here. Love is everything. And whenever my gas tank is empty, and you know, those nights where I'm like, I don't know how much more I have to give, God's taught me that when you feel like that, you need to do something loving. And when you do something loving, in return you will feel loved. And it's like almost like the chicken before the egg kind of thing.
Give and you shall receive.
You reap what you sow. And so the times where I didn't necessarily feel like it, I was like, you know what, I'm going to show my son so much love right now and just see him glow. And then the next thing I know, I feel better.
Yeah. It's so important. I'm so glad that you just said that at the end where you said you feel better thereafter. It's what you get back. And that's what empowers you. It's like that's your fuel.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I'm hearing from you, that has been your fuel. That you and what you give to Aiden, because he needs it, it fuels you to go on and keep doing what you're doing because he needs it and you need it.
Amen, sister.
Right? Amen, sister.
Yeah.
Yeah. So powerful. So I'm happy you said that. So, you know, I want you, because like you, there's other moms out, dads, caregivers, whoever it is that are out there dealing with this possible diagnosis, dealing with a child that they're seeing has these symptoms, maybe are on a wait list to see if that indeed is what it is. Maybe it's a new parent that just got the diagnosis that their child has this and is feeling the way you felt, you know, in the early days. I just want you to look in the camera and give some advice to one of these parents to help them along. Kind of something that's going to make them feel, you know what? I can do this. I can do this.
You can do this. You're not alone. Please don't ever give up. Don't ever give up. Even in the most hardest moments, the most difficult times when you feel like there is no hope, I promise you, there is hope. And there is a reason for the pain and the suffering. There will be so much love that comes from that. And you are not alone. I understand. I really, truly do. And I mean that from the most loving place.
That's nice, Jen. It's so important to know that, because I think when you're feeling, you're in the dark times, it's like nothing that anybody says will change that. Like the feeling is so strong. And now you have this child, who you bring a child into the world, you want only the best for them. You want them to be happy, loved. You want them to smile. You want only good things to come. And then you get this diagnosis and you think that it's, you know, how like you felt guilty, you felt bad, you felt sad for your child, that he's going to have to deal with this the rest of his life. And what I want to add to that, I'm going to jump onto the tail end of that, is that, you know, don't ever compare your child's situation or what you're dealing with what somebody else is dealing with. And I'm specifically talking about this disease, this diagnosis right now, this disorder, because there's such a range in how it's shown, a range in symptoms, a range, like we were talking before, there's children that are, you know, pretty normal looking and acting like Aiden, and then there's children that are going to have more severe effects. So don't ever, you know, look at another person's situation and say, okay, well, mine's not that bad because my child doesn't, you know, rock back and forth, or, you know, he can speak, you know, or that child can't speak and mine can, so, you know, my situation's not bad. You know, don't compare, because at the end of the day, it's relative to what you know and what you deal with and what you can and can't handle, right?
100%. So
I think that's important for you to know. That being said, we're coming to the end, and I always like to give some informational resources and support group names for those that want to do some research on their own, or that want to know where to go to get some help. So I'm just going to read some off, and you can write them down as we go along, or you can. The good thing about watching videos is that you can pause and go back. So we have autismcanada.org, autismjunction.ca, And that's a comprehensive online autism service and directory for parents, caregivers, professionals, or individuals looking for resources. Autism Speaks Canada. That's a national Canadian charity dedicated to promoting solutions across the spectrum and along a lifespan for needs of people with autism spectrum disorder and their families. And then we have Sharing the Spectrum podcast. So that's an autism podcast. It's an online production celebrating the diversity of people on the autism spectrum. And then some support groups that I found. A lot of Facebook support groups. Facebook Autism Mom support group. So that's one you're going to want to look at. Ontario Autism Coalition. Parenting with Asperger's Syndrome. Autism Makes Me Laugh. I think that'll be a great one. I looked through that and I was seeing a lot of things that was making me laugh. And that's where they share their love and appreciation for these fun, quirky, beautiful individuals. There's Carrie's Place Autism Services. Have you heard of that one?
Yes.
Yeah. Has been committed to enhancing the quality of life of persons with autism spectrum disorder since 1974. And then we have Autism Support Network. It's a free support community that connects thousands of other families and individuals touched by ASD. Okay, so that is a wrap. And I want to say again, thank you so much for being transparent, for opening up and talking about a very personal issue. And I know you said this is the first time that you're talking about it in such a on a broad spectrum, and we really hope this message gets out to those who need to hear it. And I think that this might be the start of something great for you, where you can turn around and start educating and inspiring and empowering others through, maybe a platform of your own. And I really see you doing that. And I see the passion and hear the passion in your voice.
The little fire in
Yeah. So thanks everybody for watching the video today and for listening in its entirety. Rewind if you need to hear it again. Share it with others who you think could hear this information. Subscribe. It's really, like I said before, it takes a lot for my guests to come and sit down and talk about their personal issues. So I appreciate you taking the time to sit down and listen to them. Please don't forget to see what else is happening. All High Heel Diaries, anything that I'm doing with High Heel Diaries, any of the events that I do are all posted on all my social media networks. So on my website, High Heel Diaries, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, everything's out there. And don't forget that heal is spelled H-E-A-L for healing. Thanks everybody for coming and for sitting with us today. Take care. Bye-bye.